Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for tuning in to this Remote-a-thon series event hosted by Guru. Guru is a collaborative knowledge management solution. And in this series, we're really excited to be featuring amazing leaders across CX, sales enablement, and knowledge management. All sessions, including this one, will be recorded and available to watch after the fact. And then in the CX track, we actually already have a session live on demand with Jordan Pedraza from Handshake that talks all about building a 21st century CX team. So be sure to check that one out. It was a really incredible session. Today, though, we are absolutely thrilled and so grateful to be hosting Brooke Wayne from FreshBooks. She's an incredible leader in the field. She's carved a really unique and fulfilling career path for herself within support. And she also happens to be a really phenomenal human being and a friend of mine. So super happy to have you here, Brooke. Thank you so much for joining. To give a sense for what to expect, this conversation will cover sort of three bigger topics within the broader theme of building new career paths in support. And then, as I said, we'll close the session with plenty of time for Q&A. So with that, I'll briefly introduce myself and then turn it over to Brooke. So I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and then migrated up to the Northeast. After one too many Northeast winters, I made the trek out west to San Francisco and have been fully enjoying and embracing the outdoors here. I've been at Guru for about a year, and I'm a senior manager on the product marketing team, focused specifically on creating the best possible product and experience for our customer support and customer success teams. I'm really thrilled to be joined here today by Brooke, and so looking forward, Brooke, to diving in with you and hearing about your impressive career trajectory and lessons we can learn from your experience, whether early in our careers or in management and leadership positions. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Brooke, to introduce yourself, your adorable little furry friend, and then to tell us a bit about FreshBooks and your team.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So, hi everybody, I'm Brooke. I'm also known as Batman, since we share the same last name. And as a cyber, I'm holding here, so if you have trouble understanding me, the talk will be online later with subtitles. I want to give a huge shout out to Elizabeth for hosting and to Guru for having me, and of course to everybody watching the talk. I'm super excited to share my story with you all. So I'm a Canadian, born and raised in Toronto. And as Elizabeth said, I'm a proud dog parent of a really cute dog who is a Aussie Cavalier mix named Frisky. I've been with FreshBooks for over 4 years now, and we are a cloud accounting company where we help small business owners run their business without having to learn accounting. Currently, I'm a program lead of communication and support, and for that reason, I handle all of the documentation for a support team to reference, but I also manage our help center articles so that our customers can self-serve themselves. More importantly, the role that I have today was one that never existed before. I actually ended up creating my own shop at FreshBooks. So in order to understand how I got here today, let me take you back to the beginning real quick. So over 4 years ago, I was hired as a support agent at FreshBooks. I had strong communication skills and a passion for helping others, but I didn't really have any clear goal on what I wanted to do as a career. I did not want to do that kind of work forever. So kind of like the sprinkler drawing that you see there, it took a lot of trial and error, but I ended up finding something that I was passionate about and turned that into my full-time job today. It wasn't a very straightforward process by any means, but looking back, it took dreamy session, putting together a gradual plan, and delivering an excellent business proposal to help convince the right people to let me make my own world instead. So I hope that you learn from my experience, put together a program or improve the existing program so that your agent can feel empowered to create their own worlds. So if you want to make work exciting again, keep listening.
Brooke, I just want to say that I can really relate to that squiggly line that you drew. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's so easy to assume that everyone else has this, clearly defined linear path, but it's actually a bit of a relief to see that in some ways the loops and turns are part of a process to finding a fulfilling career. So I really can't wait to learn how you were able to get from that starting point to present.
Absolutely. I would definitely go over that in detail. Now that you know all about me, I'm going to talk about my journey from a support agent to my brand new role. Specifically, I'll talk about what the career options were like for me back then and how I stumbled onto a project. And then next, I'll explain how I managed to slowly spend more time on the project until I was able to meet my job expectation and keep working on it. And finally, I'll talk about what I've done in taking my project to a full-time career. Hopefully that will help inspire you all, whether you're a leader or a support agent, on how you can make a bigger difference moving forward.
Thank you so much for this introduction, Brooke. You are such a phenomenal trailblazer in the field of support, and we're really lucky to be able to learn from your story today. I think this is a super important topic because many support organizations struggle with agent retention and in helping agents see support as a real career rather than just a stepping stone to something else. So super excited for this conversation today. To get us started, could you tell us a bit about your early days in support and what your career options were like?
So there was not really much in the way of career options back then, but the road began for me, like most do, in my one-on-ones with my team lead, where we talk about my work programs and my career aspirations. Most companies, by including, want to ensure the support agent have room to grow and develop. In the one-on-one, I would often ask about what career path interested me the most, and these were by option. One technical support, where you handle escalation, you conduct investigation, troubleshoot complex issues, maybe the API is involved. Then the other option one, people management, where you become a team lead and you grow and burn a team of support agent, maybe if you become a manager or a director. But here's the thing, neither of those tracks really appeal to me at all. And that brought me to my first working alone, where I did not want to leave support because I genuinely enjoy the people, the culture, and the awesome variety of customers while working on frontline. But I didn't love that I had to be by quota at the end of every day. It was stressful. I didn't like how burnt out I felt talking to angry customers, and it also felt really isolated. It's just you at the customer, you don't really get to collaborate with the coworkers. So as a result, my job satisfaction went declining, and it was only a matter of time before the con outweighed the pros. Because I didn't pick a career path yet, my team was very persistent in checking with me often on the topic. We ran book, blog posts, we had brief daily sessions together just to try and spark some ideas. But it wasn't until she asked me the question, then a light bulb went off in my head. And the question was, if you could do anything to make the company better, what would it be?
I love this question. I think it's so simple, but actually is really liberating and powerful for someone in any role in the company.
For sure, it's a great open-ended question, and it actually gave me a lot of ideas. So I wrote them all down, and when I looked at the ideas, they all had a common theme, and that theme was all around documentation. The ideas were things like capturing knowledge, consolidating registration into a central place, improving channel and communication. Now I had something that made work exciting again. I would have never thought to consider working on a project instead of be forced to pick a path that I know I would have been unhappy with, but that brief training session was really helpful. What I've learned is that for leaders, having conversation around career development is really valuable. Make sure your agent know that they have room to think and dream big, like the way my manager did with our brief training session. For agent, think about what you want to improve and use that to get you excited about work again. Even if you don't think you can make a career out of it, a project could teach you lots of useful skills during the time that you're working on it. You always want to be continuously learning anyways.
Brooke, thank you for this. I love how you talk about the process you went through to break from the established career paths. I've definitely been there before where I'm not sure quite what my next step should be. And I think it can be somewhat paralyzing for folks. But I so appreciate your advice around paying attention to what truly gets you excited and kind of leaning into that. I also think the role of your team lead is super inspiring and can provide an amazing role model for other managers. I actually want to bring that question into performance reviews across departments at Guru, so stay tuned for that. Now I want to turn to the audience with a quick poll. And so let me just launch this. So when you began your career, did you know exactly what path you wanted, and did you follow that path? And I'll give us 30 seconds or a minute to get the answers in.
Obviously, my answer was no, I did not know what I was doing. That's why I didn't either talk.
Absolutely. I can totally relate to that, Brooke. I definitely graduating with an anthropology major, wanting to go into business. I started in consulting and now I'm in a tech startup. So definitely a work in progress.
Yeah,
All
I have a
right,
background in art. I went to an art university. I have a degree in fine arts, so here I am working at a tech company.
All right, I think we have, most people are in. So I'm gonna share the results, and everyone in the audience said no. They did not know exactly what path they wanted and did not follow that path, which is actually really reassuring in some ways. And I think, Brooke, it makes this conversation all the more important and valuable.
Yeah, it's great to see that I'm not the only one who struggled. I was always envious of people who had like their career path laid out and they knew exactly what they wanted to do. Like at FreshBooks, there were people who were like, yes, I want to be a team lead. That is exactly what I'm going to do. And they should run for it. And I was just twiddling my thumb myself. I don't want to be a team lead or a technical support person. I'm not really sure what to do.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I think actually though, in this conversation, you give so many really practical, actionable tips for sort of how to define that path. So Clearly, given the audience response, this is a really important topic. So thank you, Brooke, again, for sharing your wisdom with us all. All right, so you identified an area you were really excited about, and then dove into a project focused on it, but you still had your full-time job. So how were you able to leverage that one side project to build a whole new career path for yourself?
So that's a tricky point. No one had really done this before. So I had to figure things out along the way. The key ones, as long as I went by expectation as a foundation, I could any spare time I had to work on this project. So that's where I began. At the time, it felt like a really messy process full of trial and error. But when I look back on it, it was actually more of a gradual process. First, I make sure that I met my expectation as a supportation, and that means doing my cation and doing them well in terms of quality and quantity. After all, this was the job I was hired for. Secondly, I worked out an agreement with my teammate where any spare time I had could be used to work on the passion project. This was really helpful on slow days, and it also motivated me to get my quota taken care of as early the day as much as possible. Thirdly, after proving that I was meeting my expectation and being successful with the project so far, my team was able to get my quota vacation reduced slightly just so that I could work on my project more often, meaning I didn't always have to rely on spare time to work on it. Fourthly, my team was able to get approval from the management team to work on kind of a better arrangement where they use the formula and take all the time that I spend on the project and convert it into patient so that I could still be my quota on a daily basis. We also put it into writing in my performance reviews so that my project was included in my goal and progress, which we review on a regular basis. Lastly, it was clear that I enjoyed working on the project way more than working on cases, and it was only the tip of the iceberg. There was lots more work to be done and more than enough work for a full-time role. So when I arrived at that last stage, it seemed I had stumbled onto my career path. I wanted to keep working on documentation, which meant I had to convince my leadership team to let me do this full time instead. So you see my story as an example. As a leader, find a way to build creative freedom into your culture so that your agent can experiment and try new things to keep work exciting. You can even make that freedom a part of the job description at higher level for a support agent to get them motivated to progress career-wise, but also allow project growth and progress to be recognized in performance reviews so that it could be recognized more formally. And as an Asian, regardless of whether it's a short-term or long-term project, use that opportunity to learn new skills. Everything you learn will be beneficial in some way, especially time management and project management. Those were so important for me to learn.
Brooke, I'm so inspired by your ability and courage to really break the mold and lean into something that was both valuable to the business and personally fulfilling. I also love your advice to leaders to build creative freedom into their culture. This isn't just nice, warm, and like a fuzzy thing to do, but actually directly valuable to employee retention, engagement, and happiness. It almost sounds easy listening to you recount your journey, but it can actually be, and I'm sure was for you at times, really, really tough to carve your own path where none has existed before. So I want to turn to the audience now with that, with a poll. And the question is, which of the following do you feel are a barrier to creating your own unique career path? And let me just watch this, and you can select all that apply.
I'm very curious to see what people select.
I am as well. I actually think this would be a good exercise to do at Guru with my whole team. I think it would be very enlightening. Results are starting to come in. Give it a little bit more time. All right. Any last answers in? We have almost everyone. All right. And wow. So 83% of the audience members said vision for what you want to do is the biggest barrier to creating your own unique career path. I think that's so telling, and actually takes me back to that question that your team lead, Brooke, asked you, where like that is such an important exercise because it's hard to know what you want to do. So then we had 50% of the audience said time to invest in passion projects is a barrier. 50% also said executive buy-in. So stay tuned, those of you who said that, because Brooke is gonna speak to that in the next section. And then we had a third of the audience said that encouraging an open culture is a barrier to creating your own unique career path, as well as low confidence, which I think could be a whole talk in and of itself. And then 17% said that having a supportive manager was a barrier, which in some ways I'm actually very encouraged that on the flip side, folks seem to feel that they do have that supportive manager. Because I know for you, Brooke, that was a really important component of your ability to kind of carve your own path.
These results are really interesting. I definitely sympathize when the 83% then felt like they didn't have a vision. And for me, I was working on Frontline for over a year before I even figured out what my vision was.
Mm-hmm.
And like sometimes you should have to work on one thing, should take a baby step. If there's something good, interesting, or curious about, that's your baby step, and you could work on that. And if you don't like it, now you know that's one less thing you can think about. I thought you could try something else. And it's kind of like trying on shoes. You should keep trying on them until you find the right one that fits. One thing that was really helpful for me is I should make a list of whatever I like to work on. And as you go through the list, you might find that you enjoy one thing more than the rest, and that could give you a better idea of your vision.
I love that. And I think also knowing that it doesn't have to be this like eureka moment of this is what I should be doing with my life, but it's a little bit more like this is a hypothesis about what A, I think I would really enjoy, and B, I think would be really good at, and then C, I think would be valuable for the business. And it's just kind of a working hypothesis that you know is probably going to shift and evolve, but I think that reduces some of the pressure of having this clearly defined vision for your career path.
I also noticed that time to invest in passion project was also a popular one, and I could really understand that because right now with the economy and the way that things are, maybe the company has to lay off some people, which means you don't have a whole lot of free time. So I would say that sometimes if you are passionate enough about wanting to work on this project, you should start having that conversation with the manager, really negotiate some terms so that everybody gets what they want with some sort of compromise.
Absolutely. And I think actually what you're going to speak to in this next, let me close out the poll. This next section actually really speaks to that and how you can kind of make the case for yourself. So really excited for that. Before we move on to the last topic, just wanted to remind everyone in the audience to continue dropping in any questions you have for Brooke right into the Zoom chat, and we'll cover them in the closing Q&A session. So, you know what you want to do, Brooke, and you have an advocate and your team lead, but how do you, to our conversation before, how do you then convince the rest of the leadership team to support and frankly fund, invest in your new career path?
That's a great question, Elizabeth. I knew that my next step was to get leadership on board with this, which meant I had to go up to their level a bit. Either leadership role that translate to a business case to prove that this is valuable for the support department and for the company as a whole. In all the time that I've spent figuring out my career path with this project and putting together that business case, I've learned two really important lessons. The first lesson is the value of tracking your time. Log all the time you spend on the project. That will give you the proof of how much time the project takes, especially if there is more than enough work for full time. So, for example, as I mentioned previously, I would track my time, set it to my team name, they would convert in education so that I could meet my expectation on a daily basis. The other lesson I learned was the value of tracking the impact of my work. And there's been showcasing the improvement and tying it back to metrics wherever possible. So, for example, I used one of our support management metrics to see if our agent time spent on ticketing declined after I overhauled our documentation, and it did. So that metric was really helpful. As long as you track your time and the improvement, you've given yourself the building material to make a business case if you ever need to make one like I did. When it comes to a business case, every company is different. So I would recommend working together with your team name and with management to find out what the criteria is. It will also get them really curious to see what you have to propose. More often than not, this business case will take the form of a proposal document or a presentation. Whether or not you're good at writing a proposal or giving a presentation, team lead could be really great coaching and cheerleaders for this. For me, because I wasn't on the leadership team and I didn't speak the language fluently, I worked together with my team lead to craft a slide deck that covered the detail my leadership team cared about the most. Also, the business case served as a great highlight of the impact you've made with a project if you ever need to showcase it to others. So when it comes to making a new career, as the leader, be as supportive as possible, help your agent out by giving them specific details that they need to have in their business case if they ask for it. The sooner you give them the criteria, the earlier they can put it together while working on their project. And as an agent, if you want to show how serious you are about making a project a full-time career, be prepared to prove it. document everything you worked on, show how much time you spend, make it hard for your bosses to say no.
Brooke, I so appreciate these tips on building a business case to prove the need for your desired path. It's brilliant, frankly. And I think it highlights, to your point, how important it is to speak the language relevant to each of your key stakeholders. And for leadership and more senior executives, that probably does mean less of what you're passionate about, what makes you happy, and maybe a little bit more of that ROI rationale. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely. Everything I've talked about can be boiled down to these 3 key points. So first, vision, brainstorm together as a leader, help your agent think about where they could go, and as an agent, think about projects that you would be excited to work on. 2, plot a journey, work together as a leader and as an agent to slowly spend more time on a project while managing the frontline expectation. And then lastly, document everything. Track your time and your efforts so that you can make the case to go full time. Otherwise, you have a great highlight of your achievements. So even though I started as a support agent, I eventually became unhappy and unmotivated with the current career paths. And while those career paths are still available now, there are now many more new ones thanks to the program that we've implemented after my work was created. The best part is I'm still excited to coming to work every day now. Thank you so much for listening to my story.
Wow, Brooke, thank you. I know I speak for everyone watching that this was incredibly inspiring, empowering, and really actionable. It was such a privilege to get to hear your journey and how you were able to carve out a new and unique career path within that kind of umbrella of support. Thank you for sharing so many incredible takeaways for people across all stages of their career journeys. I hope that those listening will implement some of your tips and tricks so that we have more folks across support leading really fulfilling careers. You're such an incredible role model and embodiment of the future of support and the possibilities within support. So thank you again, Brooke, for this phenomenal conversation. With the time remaining, I now want to open things up to the audience for some Q&A. So I'll switch over and take a look at the questions that have come in, and I'm seeing a few. So let's see, Brooke, what was the timeline like of you figuring out your current path?
Great question. So let's see. I was on frontline for about 1.5 years before I got promoted to third new role. And I would say that in the 1 year, that was like me learning about our product. And then once I got comfortable, a period of time passed where I was like, okay, I kind of want to do something a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is. And I would say like in the 0.5 years, so half a year, that's where I really had the career conversation with my team and where we were just brainstorming and thinking about what I could do. And then I would say that in that 0.5, in that half a year, was where I started working on the project and really putting the hand down, really working on it and building up a business case for it. And then after 1.5 years, I made that proposal and that's when I got the role.
Got it. Thank you for that. And then there was a follow-up question. So were there any specific writing or other exercises you did to figure out your career path? You mentioned making lists earlier in the conversation, I think around the barrier of having that vision.
Great question too. My manager loved reading books and blog posts and stuff. So she would send me blog post links and we had like a book club together where we would read a book. One of them was called Radical Candor, and all up put the name there. It's basically a book on heavy content conversation with your manager and with your direct. And there were lots of like questions in there about what value do you care about, what's important to you, and lots of little exercises where you could fill things down. And honestly, I have this Google Doc that's like 10 pages long, just full of like different questions, different exercises, and I should put everything in that Google Doc.
Yeah.
Because when you take a step back and you look at it as a whole, you could start picking out the themes that keep coming up a lot.
I love that. I think that's amazing advice. And I also want to check out Radical Candor. And I love the idea, Rachel said this in the chat, but I do totally love the idea of having a career-oriented book club, especially with your manager. So that's incredible. Okay, we have another question in here. So what was the company size when you started plotting your new path? And then how do you think someone in a small support team would negotiate a new position?
So for me, when I started, I think we were around, I want to say 40 to 50, maybe 60 people altogether, and that includes frontline or technical support team, the manager and teammates. And of the frontline team, I think we were around like the 30 or 40 mark. And we were, at capacity. We had the right amount of people to take on the right amount of cases. So that would probably be the company side. And then the second question.
How do you think someone in a small support team would negotiate a new position?
So then in a very fun situation to be in, because you have a little bit of power in that, they need you because you're so small. But if they want to retain you, keep you happy, keep you protected, that's where you can really negotiate with them. So maybe they won't let you go full time right away. Maybe you could ask them for 1 day a week where you could be focusing on the project, or you can work out something like maybe in the afternoon you could do this project, and then in the morning you work on frontline support. Should try to work with the manager to kind of come to a compromise, because if they want to keep you, they will do anything to make it happen in their power.
I also think potentially, and Brooke, you tell me, but I've seen when you're working on a smaller team, you're kind of forced to be doing a lot of different things. And so to actually have the discipline to take the time to notice which of those many things that fall within your day-to-day you are really excited about, then as the team grows, that is something that you could probably naturally evolve into when there's that opportunity for more specialization.
Yeah, so if you are a small team and you're doing a million different things, because there's only so many of you, tracking your time is really useful, because you could then tell your manager that even though they think you're working on frontline all day, you've actually also been doing this thing, this other thing, and that other thing. And if you track the time you spend on the non-frontline thing and you show it to them, that could really make it more transparent into what you've been doing behind the scenes and getting that more formally recognized. Because if they see you spend 30% of a work week helping answer a question on Slack, they might be like, okay, maybe we can let you work on documentation so that we can take some of the pressure off of answering questions on Slack. That's just an example of how tracking your time can be really powerful for that.
Amazing. And I think looking at the time, we'll do one more question and then kind of wrap up. But Brooke, how do you think the shift to remote work could impact support career paths and opportunities?
That could be a good or a bad thing. A debate of both, in my opinion, because the shift to remote work means that you have to be way more transparent about what you're working on from home, because no one is there to see you in person. So no one knows what you're doing outside of like their little home office or their bedroom or wherever they're working. So if you shown that you've been working on the other stuff while working remotely, then you have a lot more motivation and a lot more power in convincing your leadership to potentially make a new career path for you or to give you some time to work on this project.
Yep.
I also think that the shift to remote work is a good thing because it exposes a lot of gaps where things might fall through the cracks because we've never noticed when we were in the office, but now that we're working remote, we're like, oh no, we need someone to do that because now it's important.
Absolutely. And I actually think your role in particular is probably more important than ever, making sure that your team is empowered with the proper documentation, particularly when you can't just tap a peer on the shoulder sitting next to you. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, Brooke. And I just wanted to highlight before sort of wrapping up, one of the comments in the chat. So Alex was saying, Brooke, thanks to Brooke taking the initiative to convince us how amazing this role could be. We've seen an amazing decline in those basic info of cases and more people turning to self-serve and are down 30% in load year over year. So wanted to see if you had any reactions to that, Brooke.
Yeah, that's actually my manager, and that's a really good example of how my work could be really helpful to the support department and to our company, because if people self-serving themselves online, then our support team can focus on the really complex cases, which is way more valuable for their time.
Amazing. Well, we are about at time, so I'll cover a couple last things to wrap up, and then we'll let everyone get back to their days. First of all, join the Guru community. There's a number of different ways that you can get involved. You can join our Slack community where folks like Brooke are active in sharing knowledge, building relationships, having conversations like these. You can also check out our upcoming webinars and events. And then importantly, you can tune into more of the Remote-a-thon sessions if you enjoyed this one. From CX leaders, there's already one from Handshake available, and Slack and Mode Analytics to come. And then we also have sessions from leaders from sales enablement and knowledge management. And then we want to hear from you. So please get involved and reach out. So I think with that, that's a wrap for today's Remote-a-thon session. Brooke, thank you again for your amazing contribution. It's truly been a privilege to get to learn from you. And to all those tuning in, thank you. I hope you're leaving the session with inspiration and ideas for your own careers and for those of your team members. So thank you all again.
Thank you all again. Really appreciate the opportunity to share my story.
Amazing.
And it's always great to talk to you too, Elizabeth.
You too, Brooke. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I'm looking forward to bringing back a lot of your insights and tips to my own career development and my own one-on-ones with my manager. So thank you, Brooke.